Hello again, everyone. It's me, MadameMacabre. Today we'll be revisiting some frightful stories from the past. This is going to be a lengthier video for those of you who enjoy playing long-form content in the background. Today's theme is Unexplained Phenomenon. So settle in and prepare for 3 terrifying tales that make you question the reality. Dad, you said you'd play catch with me, I yelled as my father walked past me to his office, where he spent most of his days when he wasn't at work. I'm sorry, bud. I gotta get these documents done for tomorrow's big meeting. We'll do it another day, okay? I frowned. That was the same excuse he always gave me, and the same follow-up he always had. We'll do it another day. Yeah, sure we will, I thought. The longer I stood in front of his door, the more upset I became. I eventually huffed and puffed enough to the point where I stormed out of the house. I left for my go-to place when I was upset, the treehouse. To a 12-year-old kid, a treehouse was the perfect place for a kid to just get away from his problems and be a kid. It was Reese's and my place to go when we were sad, mad, or just bored out of our minds. It was our little getaway when things went awry in our lives. We also went there just to hang out. It was our spot. We had found the treehouse one day while looking through the woods for buried treasure. We didn't find any treasure, but we did stumble upon the treehouse. We climbed up the ladder and viewed the place from inside. Reese called it a dump, but I saw potential in it. I fixed her up, grabbing fold-up chairs, a rug, and a blanket to cover the only window in the wooden box to create the coolest treehouse ever. We kept our comic books, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and other miscellaneous knickknacks up there. Now that I got the treehouse out of the way, let me explain to you who Reese is. Reese is my best friend. He moved in next door when I was in the 2nd grade. We went over to their house and introduced ourselves. I went into Reese's room and saw that he had a Nintendo 64. We sat down and played Super Smash Bros. All day, and that first visit became a sleepover, which we spent staying up late playing video games till our eyes became sore, and then some. Reese was a good kid. Sure, he'd get into trouble occasionally, like the one time he fed his sister's goldfish to the cat, but he was overall a good kid. He'd get into trouble for sneaking out and constantly was a smart aleck to the teachers, but again, he was a good kid and, most importantly, my best friend, my only friend. That day, Reese was on the last of his grounding. He was caught sneaking out that night. I was supposed to sneak out as well, but I got cold feet and stayed in bed. Reese went to the treehouse alone, and when he realized I wasn't there, returned home where his parents caught him trying to sneak back in. Reese would always tease me, clucking and calling me a chicken when I did stuff like this. I was sure that once he got loose from the confines of his room, he'd be all up in my ear about it. I entered the woods and was making my way to the treehouse. I was about 3/4 of the way there, swinging a stick I found a while back, pretending it was Excalibur, when I saw it. It was a black hole, the size of a bowling ball, levitating at eye level a few feet away from me. It looked like someone took a picture and hole punched it, leaving a black spot in its place. I approached it curiously. I tried to go around and get a side view of the thing, but it disappeared. I walked behind it where it would have been, and it reappeared. The hole was paper thin and couldn't be seen from its sides. I looked at it intensely, trying to see anything inside. I looked down at Excalibur and lifted it upwards. I slowly inserted the stick into the black hole. Suddenly, like a vacuum, the hole absorbed the stick, forcing me to let it go. I fell backwards on my rear end, kicking my legs and skittering back in a feeble attempt to create distance between the black hole and me. I breathed heavily as I stared at the hole in astonishment. Then the stick spat out and fell at my feet. I was frozen in place for a good minute. I didn't know what to do. Then I had an idea. I ran over to a tree and grabbed an acorn off the ground. I went up to the hole and chucked the acorn in. I waited a minute. Then the acorn came out, whizzing past my head. "Whoa," I said. That's when I had another idea. I went home and grabbed the football from my bedroom, just in case my dad decided he wanted to play catch with me. I brought it to the black hole, got in a throwing stance, stretched my arm backwards, winding up the shot, and then threw. Of course, I missed the hole completely. I ran and grabbed the ball, got closer to the hole, and threw it underhanded. This time, it went in. A minute passed, and then the ball popped right back out and bounced a few times before it rolled up close to me. I smiled and prepared another throw. I got into the stance, stretched my arm backwards, and chucked it as hard as I could. This time, the ball went in, no problem. A minute went by, and I just stood in front of the hole. The ball suddenly came out fast, spiraling, and hit me dead in the stomach. I fell to my knees in shock and pain. I wasn't expecting it to come out that hard. That's when I realized that it all depended on the strength of my throw. If I throw it weakly, the hole would toss it back out with the same momentum. Throw it hard, and it comes back hard. I played catch with the black hole for a good hour, then made my way home. I couldn't wait to show Reese. The next day arrived. It was Sunday, so after Reese got back from church, I was ready to show my friend the coolest thing ever. When my friend got back home, I quickly ran over to his house and asked his parents if he could hang out. They said of course, and we went to the treehouse. "Dude, I have something amazing to show you," I said, hyped for my friend to see my cool find. Yeah, sure you do," he responded. We walked about 3/4 of the way and started to approach where I'd seen the black hole. That's when Reese spotted it. "Whoa, what the hell is that thing?" "It's a portal," I eagerly said. We looked at it for a good minute and then made our way closer. "Throw this into it," I said, unable to hold back the excitement in my voice. I handed him the football and he brought his arm back and threw it in on his first try. I was a little envious, but I had to remember that Reese played baseball, so his aim was going to be better than mine. "Now what?" he asked. "Just wait." A minute went by, even though it felt like an eternity, and the ball finally popped back out and landed on the ground in front of Reese. Reese didn't say anything for a moment. He knelt and picked up the football. He scrutinized it carefully, looking for any scuffs or nicks on the ball. "That was pretty amazing," he said in a monotonous tone. I smiled, grabbed the ball back from him, and threw it into the hole once again. We played for a good 30 minutes. At first, Reese wanted to know how many things could go through the hole. He threw rocks, acorns, even a worm into the hole. All came out just like they had before. Then we took turns tossing the football into it. "What's on the other side?" Reese finally asked. "I don't know. Space stuff? What if there's like a whole nother dimension on the other side of it? Maybe there's an alternate version of us." I tossed the football into the portal again and waited for its reemergence. "Yeah, I guess it's possible." "Aren't you at all curious what's on the other side?" I thought for a moment. "Yeah, well, I guess I'm a little curious." Well, what?" I asked, confused. "Stick your head through the portal." "What? No way!" I said, backing up, as if to say no with my body. "Come on, don't be a chicken like you were the other night." There it was, the chicken comment. I knew it was coming. "I don't care what you say, I'm not doing it," I said, not letting peer pressure get the best of me. Every time he pressured me into doing something, we always ended up in trouble. That's when he began to cluck, bending his arms to his torso to resemble chicken wings. "Chicken, chicken, chicken," he chanted. "Look, I'm not doing it. You don't know what could be on the other side. What if there's a monster or something?" "Come on, man, it's just a portal. Don't you want to know who's been tossing the ball back through?" I didn't think about that aspect of it. I guess there could have been someone on the other side catching the ball and then tossing it back to us, but I still didn't budge my decision. "Ugh, you puss," he finally shouted, which hit hard. He'd never called me that before. I didn't even know that word was in his vocabulary. I knew the word too, but I didn't want to say it. He began to walk towards the portal, and I shouted at him, "What are you doing, Reese?" "I'm gonna look through the portal." I quickly followed him, trying to explain that it was a bad idea, but he wasn't having any of it. Look, you can be a chicken your whole life. You gotta take chances sometimes. Plus, I want to know who or what has been on the receiving end of our passes, don't you? I guess, but I don't think it's safe to just poke your head into things you don't understand. Puss, he said, as he bent forward to stick his head into the hole. He hesitated at first, maybe to take in what he was about to do, then plunged his head into the hole. A few long seconds passed by, and nothing happened. He just stood there, his arms limp at his side, looking through the hole. I looked around nervously, like we were doing a bad deed and I was on the watch. Then, everything happened at once. Reese fell backwards, hitting the ground hard. I stood right behind him and was hit by something warm and wet, as if someone sprayed me with a super soaker with hot water. I looked down at the ground. He was missing his head. His neck leaked copious amounts of blood all over the place. That's when I realized that I was covered in blood. I screamed a scream only children can make. Then something flew out of the portal, and I instinctively caught it as it slammed into my chest. I looked down at the thing in my hands and screamed again. It was Reese's head. His face was twisted in horror, like he'd seen a ghost. His tongue lolled to the side, and his eyes were glazed over, a white, milky film covering his barely visible pupils. Memories started flooding into my head. Thoughts of the times Reese and I would play hooky from school, the times we'd sneak out and would tell scary stories to each other in the treehouse, trying to make each other pee our pants. All the fond memories I'd ever had of Reese came all together at once, and were shattered with one new, horrifying mental scar. My hands began to tremble, and I dropped Reese's head to the dirt and ran away. I kept running till I made it home. I opened the door and slammed it behind me, and then ran to the restroom to wipe Reese's blood from my face. I spent half an hour scrubbing Reese's blood from my face and another the blood off my clothes. I was petrified. I walked out of the restroom and ran up the stairs to my bedroom. I got into bed even though it was only 6 o'clock and lay there mortified. My eyes were wide open, looking straight at the ceiling and staring into space. The image of Reese's body dropping to the ground and his head landing in my arms kept playing over and over in my head. Then, after hyperventilating for a good 10 minutes, I fell asleep. My dad woke me up. I opened my eyes and thought to myself, that was one weird dream. But my father knocked me out of that thought when he asked me if I knew where Reese was. Apparently, he hadn't come home, and his parents thought that maybe he was over here. They filed a missing persons report the next day, thinking that maybe Reese had run away. After a few days went by, the police decided to do a search of the woods. They spread out and eventually found his decapitated body on the woodland floor. Local news played the story everywhere. They were still looking for his killer and asking if anybody had any information that they should call the police department. I picked up the phone a few times, mostly to clear my own conscience, which was eating me alive. But I didn't because I knew no one would believe me. Who would? Hey, my friend stuck his head through a portal and it bit his head off. Yeah, I'm sure that would be taken seriously. After all this time, one question remains with me, though. What did my friend see on the other side of that portal?
So, I married a clown. This isn't the setup for a joke. I really married a clown. That is what my husband does for a living. He dresses up in the big, goofy white outfits and entertains people with the age-old art of slapstick comedy. I have never been much of a clown person, but they are a big deal in my husband's family. Clowning around, as he calls it, has been a tradition that started with his great-great-grandparents who immigrated from France. They came to the States hoping to make it big as stage actors, but so was everyone else. With limited experience outside of acting, they had no choice but to take jobs as clowns in a traveling circus to make a living. Today, there are more professional clowns in his family than any other career. Most of them are standard clowns, but there are a few harlequins, jesters, and mimes. He even has a cousin who has an evil clown act, but most of the relatives find that disrespectful to the family's legacy and don't socialize with him very often. He's very popular at Halloween, though. When we were dating, I was a little put off when I learned that he was working as a clown. It is hard to take someone who spends their life acting like a fool seriously, but I soon learned how ignorant my perspective was. He was in the business of selling smiles and laughter, and he was really good at it. How could I not fall in love with him? I have since come to respect his abilities as an entertainer and the legacy his family has created. Now, I won't admit this to him, but I'm actually in awe of his juggling skills and amazed at the sheer number of things he can twist out of balloons. Last week, my husband's father passed away. It's an understatement to say that his family doesn't treat death the way everyone else does. They don't stand around and grieve. Instead, the family gathers together to perform in honor of the deceased. Even the evil clown cousin was invited to do his act. If you drove by the cemetery during the funeral, you would have thought there was some sort of strange clown convention taking place. Everyone was dressed up as their clown persona. Even his father was dressed in the outfit he performed in. Out of respect for my father-in-law, I made no complaints about my husband dressing in one of his old costumes. When it came time for the family to say their final goodbyes, instead of placing flowers, each person placed a clown prop of some sort on the casket. My husband placed one of his rubber chickens that he used during his juggling act. None of this was a surprise to me, having already gone through it when his mother died several years earlier. A few days after the funeral, we found ourselves going through his father's house, trying to determine what things we were going to keep and what we were going to get rid of. It took a couple of days, but we managed to go through every room in the house, except the attic. We decided to donate most of the clothes and furniture to a local family crisis center where his father used to do volunteer work. All of his clown paraphernalia and associated collectibles and keepsakes my husband was going to keep. He already owned a small museum worth of his own clown stuff, but I knew better than to protest and just loaded everything into the car. There wasn't much in the attic worth keeping or donating. Most of it was damaged and had to be thrown away. The attic wasn't sealed off from the elements very well, so the stuff stored up there became a nest for rats and other pests. What the vermin didn't destroy, the leaky roof and fluctuating seasonal temperatures did. We did, however, find one thing up there worth keeping: an old painting. I found it tucked way back in a corner, covered in a thick quilt. I was surprised it had survived, considering how badly damaged everything else around it was. "Who is that supposed to be?" I asked, holding up the picture of a clown so my husband could see it. Given how important clowns were to their family, I figured it was some old relative. He scrunched up his face and looked at the painting and tried to come up with a name. "I have no idea. I don't remember ever seeing that painting before in my life. But that clown looks so familiar. I'm sure I've seen him before." "Maybe he was a friend of your father's," I offered in explanation. "Someone he performed with that wasn't a part of the family?" My comment was enough to knock the appropriate memories free from his mind. "I do remember him now. I was 5 or 6 when my father invited him to stay with us. Something had happened to his family. There was a fire or something. He was the only one who survived. I remember he was kind of slow, like a little kid trapped in an adult's body. Everyone called him No-No. No, they called him Oh-No the Clown." "Oh-No the Clown? What kind of name is that?" "Well, I believe it started out as a nickname. I don't think he understood the other clowns were making fun of him when they started calling him that. I didn't think clowns could be so cruel." "Yeah, well, unfortunately, some are. I think that's why my father took him in. He felt sorry for him. He didn't stay with us for very long. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. I guess he left that behind," he said, pointing to the painting. "At the time, I assumed my father found another place for him to stay, but I never saw him again. It was such a short period of time, the memories must have gotten blurred. The painting was a simple portrait of a clown. He had red diamonds painted around his protruding eyes, and a red ring circled his smiling mouth. A small patch of blue hair sprouted from the top of his otherwise bald head. In place of the standard red nose was a bright green one. The rest of his skin was painted white. All that was visible of his outfit was a large gold ruffle that ringed his neck and extended out past his shoulders. "Well, what do you want me to do with it?" I asked my husband. "You know what? I like it. Put it in the car." I knew he was going to say that. I thought it looked kind of creepy. I briefly considered manufacturing an accident so I could toss it in the trash, but I couldn't do that to him. Not since it was tied to a memory of his father. He happily carried it out to the car, and then we went back inside to finish cleaning the attic. When we got back home, my husband began stacking all the heavier things in the garage so he could sort through them later. While he did that, I took the painting out of the car and leaned it against the wall. Seeing it, however, I decided to turn it around. I didn't like the idea of it staring at me every time I got into my car. The next morning, I went to work and everything was where it had been left, except that unsightly painting. The clown was no longer facing the wall. It was staring right at me as I started my car and pulled out of the garage. I assumed my husband must have come out at some point and turned it around. I returned home 8 hours later to find most of the boxes from my father-in-law's house were gone. That meant my husband had kept his promise to sort through everything while I was at work. Oh, great, I thought when I noticed the painting was among the other things missing from the garage. That meant it was somewhere in the house. "Before you say anything, please just give it a couple of days," my husband said as I walked through the kitchen into the living room. I stopped when I noticed the giant smiling portrait of the clown hanging above the couch. "Well, what do you think?" he asked hesitantly. "It's okay, I suppose." I didn't want to hurt his feelings. "We'll try it for a few days and see how it settles into the room." He threw his arms around me and planted a kiss on my cheek. "Thank you, honey." I didn't see the harm in it. The only time we used the living room was when we had company, and the only company we ever had was when his family came to visit. Since the majority of them were clowns, they were more likely to appreciate the artwork. Now that being said, if he had tried to hang it in the bedroom, it would have been back in the garage the moment I saw it. But I suppose he knew better than that. I didn't pay much attention to the painting over the next few days. I think I may have subconsciously avoided looking directly at it. It was one of those portraits that, no matter what angle you were viewing it from, it was always looking right back at you. And that unnerved me. But all paintings like that made me uncomfortable. 3 days after my husband hung the picture, I noticed a commotion at the house around the corner. I couldn't help but stare as I pulled out of the garage on my way to work. There were a couple of police cars parked at the curb and an ambulance in the driveway. I didn't know the neighbors personally, but I had seen them out in their yard plenty of times. "Did you hear about what happened to the Daltons?" my husband asked me the moment I walked through the door when I returned home from work that evening. "Who?" I asked. I didn't know the names of most of our neighbors. I rarely had anything to do with them beyond a friendly wave. "The Daltons. They live on the corner. Zach and Miriam. They have twins." "No," I answered her original question. "But I saw the police and ambulance outside their house when I left for work." "Someone broke into their house last night. They broke Zach's arm and might have given him a concussion. They also gave Miriam a black eye. All of it happened in front of their terrified boys. They think it's the same person that robbed a house a couple streets over 2 nights ago." I shook my head, thankful it didn't happen to us. That night, I made sure to check all the doors and windows and make sure they were locked. We never invested in a security system. We didn't think the neighborhood warranted one, but I was starting to rethink that decision. The next few days passed uneventfully. The shock of the robbery had started to subside and the neighborhood seemed a little less tense. That didn't stop me from checking all the doors and windows before I went to bed, though. Honey, I've been thinking. We should get a dog. My husband lowered the book he was reading and looked at me. That sounds like a lot more involved than a security system, I said. I know, but I was thinking maybe I could train the dog to be a part of my act. You know, when he's not guarding the house. We went through the dog phase several years ago when we found out we couldn't have children. I thought we had buried the idea. I guess it never really went away, and he found a way to dig it back up. How about we talk about this tomorrow? I turned off the lamp on my nightstand and settled into my pillow. It's been a long week, and I just want to get some sleep. You should get some sleep too. Don't you have a gig tomorrow morning? I reminded him. You won't escape this conversation by going to sleep. I'm going to curse you to dream about dogs. Okay, I said as I started to drift off to sleep. As long as they're quiet dogs. I must have been really tired because the next thing I remember is being jolted awake. I was confused at first and couldn't tell if I was startled awake by the dream I was having or something in the real world. I looked over to my husband, who was gently snoring. It must have been my dream that woke me up. My husband was a much lighter sleeper than I was, and I figured he would have woken up first if there was a strange sound coming from the house. I listened for a few moments, just to be sure, and was about to roll over and go back to bed when I heard a loud thud. That wasn't a part of my dream. I quickly sat up and slid my feet under the bed, scanning the bedroom for something I could use as a weapon. I tried shaking my husband awake, but he was out cold. Looks like I was going to do this on my own. It may seem funny now, but in my search for a weapon, the only thing I could find was one of my husband's clown shoes. The night before a performance, he always set his costume out on the high-back chair we have in the corner of the room. I grabbed the shoe by the toe in a two-handed grip, intending to use the oversized heel as a club. Weapon at the ready, I slowly walked to the bedroom door and peeked down the hall. I didn't see anything, but I heard a soft rustling coming from the living room and then a soft tinkle of a bell. The reason I didn't call the police at first is because our phones were on the little ledge in the kitchen where we set them every night to charge. We banned them from the bedroom when we noticed we spent more time on them than talking to each other. Brilliant idea on my part. I slowly crept down the hall and the rustling continued. I didn't have much of a plan. The best I could come up with was to try and get one of the phones and then run back to the bedroom and lock the door while I called the police. I reached the corner of the hall that connected to the living room. I had my back pressed against the wall as I readied myself to sprint across the entryway to grab a phone. I decided to hazard a glance into the living room, expecting to see a burglar rummaging around in our things. That is not what I saw. When I poked my head around the corner, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. I was so stunned that I stepped out of my hiding place to take it all in, the giant clown shoe slipping from my grasp as I thought, what the hell? Standing across the room from me was a clown. A clown dressed like the one in the painting. In his hand, he held a juggling pin that was stained with a dark liquid. At his feet was a motionless body dressed in all black, a small pool of blood spreading out from underneath the head. The clown didn't seem startled to see me. When he noticed me, he just smiled, showing his large horse-like teeth, and brought a finger to his lips, telling me to stay quiet. He then held his hand out to indicate that I should wait. I looked over at the picture frame to confirm the identity of the clown, but it was empty. That was all the confirmation I needed. As I stared, the clown set the juggling pin down and started to pull a handkerchief out of his pocket, which was connected to another handkerchief, which was connected to another. You know the routine. I expected the bit to end with the clown pulling out a pair of boxer shorts while looking embarrassed. But the last thing to emerge from his pocket was a towel. He held the towel up for me to see while he pulled it free from the handkerchief it was tied to. The clown then squatted down next to the body and began to use the towel to clean up the blood. As he did so, the man on the ground groaned and began to stir. The clown didn't seem concerned. He grabbed the juggling pin, gave it a flip in the air, caught it, and then brought it down on the man's head with a wet thud. He looked over me and shrugged in an apologetic way and used the towel to clean the blood off his juggling pin before he continued to clean the floor. When he was done, he stood up and showed me the impossibly clean towel, a towel that had just been used to soak up a very large volume of blood. He showed me both sides of the unstained towel and then took a ta-da stance. I continued to stand and stare at the clown, frozen in place by the insanity of the situation. The clown placed his hand on his chin and acted like he was thinking. He then suddenly raised one finger in the air as if an idea had just occurred to him. The clown slowly knelt down over the body of the man and ripped a hole in his shirt about midway down the back. He then took his hand and placed it upon the exposed flesh. As he pressed down, his fingers sank into the man's flesh as if it were clay. He didn't stop until his entire hand was buried inside the man's back, up to his wrist. I will never forget what happened next. As the clown stood up, the body of the man also rose, as if it were nothing more than a hand puppet. The clown then proceeded to make the body dance, the arms and legs moving in time to some song only the clown could hear. I don't know how he was able to control the body with nothing but his hand shoved into its back, and frankly, I didn't want to. I had seen enough. It was time for the nightmare to end. Slowly, I turned and started to walk back to my bedroom. When I got to the hallway, I stopped and turned back around, hoping the apparition of the clown would just be gone. But it wasn't. He was still standing there, holding the corpse puppet. When he noticed I had turned around, he made the body wave goodbye to me while he feigned a sad face. I crawled back into bed, pulled the covers up, and closed my eyes. The last thing I thought before sleep claimed me was, well, who needs a dog or security system when you've already got a clown?
You know the feeling you get when you walk down a dark alleyway? The feeling you get when the lights are out in the room behind you. The feeling that someone or something is right there behind you, inching its way closer to you. Well, whatever you do, don't ever look back. My name is Michael, and I just turned 20. I worked as a security guard for a small office in a rough neighborhood. They sell paper or something along those lines. I didn't really pay attention to the other people there. I usually sat near the door during the afternoon, checking everyone that comes in and out. It was a pretty laid-back job, and it helped me pay for my night school. I usually only worked during the day, and I had never been at the office past 6. But one day, my boss asked me if I could take the late shift, as the night guard had quit due to unforeseen circumstances. Whatever that meant. Anyway, I said I'd do it, but just for that one night. All I really had to do was lock up and sit down in the main office and relax, right? Well, not really. I was given a paper with a list of a few instructions, 4 in total. Number 1, lock the doors in main room once everyone has gone home, no later than 12 a.m. Number 2, go through west hallway and lock all doors except for door number 6, which must be unlocked. Then turn around and do not move for 10 seconds, no matter what. After 10 seconds, turn and face the hallway. Then start walking. Take 1 step every second. Don't look back. Don't ever look back. Number 3, go to main office and hide under desk, facing the front, and wait for door number 6 to close and lock. Number 4, leave at 6:30 a.m. Do not lock the front door, but lock the gate. Okay, it started normal enough. I didn't know if they decided to play some kind of joke on me since it was my first time, but if it had been meant as a prank, they did a good job. I was scared out of my mind. The instructions were so specific and just altogether creepy. What would happen if I took a second more or a second less? What if I missed the deadline at 6:30? What would happen to me? I tried to get the thoughts out of my head, and I focused on the instructions. I wanted to study them before the night shift so that I wouldn't make a mistake. Before I knew it, it was 11 p.m., and most people started to leave. Janitors and workers that stayed late all started to file out, each wishing me luck. I waited a while until every single person was gone. Why would they wish me luck? I had to focus. It was only for a night. It was probably nothing, but I just wanted to make sure. At 1:45, I decided to lock up the main room and head through the hallway. Lock all the doors. Unlock door 6. Got it. Turn around and wait 10 seconds. Okay. I started counting in my head. 1, 2. Then I felt the temperature change. 3, 4. It got a little colder, and that's when I heard the door. 5. It started to open. 6. Then I felt it, like someone breathing down my neck. 7, 8. I was about to run, but then I remembered the instructions. I have to stay still. 9, 10. I turned and started down the hallway. Take a step every second. My heart was beating out of my chest. My whole body was cold. I couldn't feel my hands. I kept going even though I was about to pass out from fear. I navigated through the seemingly endless hallway, leaving behind whatever the thing was behind me. But I felt it watch me as I walked. There was nothing between me and it. If it had wanted to, it could have killed me right then and there. I was sure of it. I didn't know what it was, but I didn't feel safe near it. At the halfway point, I felt it standing there. As I passed by a fire extinguisher, I caught a glimpse of the beast's reflection in the glass. I couldn't really make it out, but whatever it was slowly approaching. It knew I had seen it. I quickened my pace ever so slightly. My whole body went numb, so much so that I couldn't even feel the ground underneath me anymore. Cold and sweating, I continued down the hallway. Almost there, I thought. I just need to get into the office and hide under the desk. I prayed to God that I'd make it, prayed to anyone that would listen at that point. By that time, I wasn't scared anymore. It was much more than that. I moved robotically, just trying to make it to the end of the nightmare. I finally got to the door and realized it was right behind me. I turned the corner and opened the door, closed it behind me, and hid under the desk as instructed. I faced the wall and waited. I remained there for a while, and during that time, nothing happened. Still, I knew it was there. I was petrified, horrified, so scared that I felt like my very soul might just give up and leave. A few more seconds passed, and all of a sudden, the door to the office opened. Is it coming in? I didn't read about this part in the instructions. What do I do? The instructions. That's when I realized I didn't have them anymore. Where had they gone? Did I drop them? What now? It came in then, the room's temperature dropping as it made its presence known. What is this thing? A demon? A monster? Whatever it was not following the rules. It was looking for me. At that point, I was in tears. I tried to hold it in at first, but my fear took over, and I didn't have to anymore. I couldn't move. My eyes blurred, and I felt myself begin to black out. That's when I heard it leave and close the door. I wanted to let out a huge breath of relief, but decided against it. I kept listening for the other door. After a second, it too closed, then locked. I let everything out then, tears streaming down my face, breathing harder than I ever have. I checked my watch. It was 6:23, just 7 minutes until 6:30, and then I could leave. I chose to remain huddled under the desk until then. 6:30 rolled around and I was ready to bolt. I opened the office door and rushed to the main entrance, practically sprinting for the gate. I got out and locked it behind me. I rushed to my car and started it. As I pulled out, I felt much safer, and so I disregarded the second instruction I'd been given and took one last look back at the building and froze, paralyzed with fear. The creature was standing in the doorway, looking right at me. I hit the gas and sped home. The next day, I handed in my letter of resignation. It's been a few weeks since then, and I found another job, but I still can't get that thing out of my head. Sometimes I feel like it's still behind me as I walk through my home. I should have never looked back, and I will never make that mistake again.